Okay, well, let's talk about Dragon's Dogma 2. This is going to be just kind of off the cuff. I will, excuse me, I will probably pause now and then just to kind of collect my thoughts so I don't unnecessarily ramble, but you can certainly count on a degree of rambling as well. For those not familiar with this game, it's made by Capcom. It has, at least in its combat systems, some of the same team members that are involved in the Monster Hunter series. And so it's been said by a number of commentators, reviewers, that, it has some DNA in common with Monster Hunter. I think it does to some degree, but it's not it's not a reinvention of the game based on the more recent changes to the Monster Hunter series that I would have hoped. It's still, I've played probably about 5 hours of Dragon's Dogma 2 and probably a total of 10 hours or less trying out different character classes and stuff in the original Dragon's Dogma. And my impression so far is that it's pretty much just the same one again, but with a lot more polish and, of course, modern visuals. But the design philosophy is very, very much the same, and the combat feels very much the same, and there's some pros and cons to that. Just an overview of the game, if you're not familiar with the original either. It's an open world fantasy RPG, but with an emphasis on the action elements of an RPG rather than the roleplay elements. And by that I mean charisma is not a stat in this game. And I don't think there's a lock-picking thing or a sneaking thing. There might be something like sneaking in the thief or, that vocation. Vocation, if I use that term, that's the term for classes. So instead of like a fighter class or a mage class, you're a fighter vocation or a mage vocation. But yeah, the stats really are about the combat. And the complexity of the systems really are about combat and combat supporting things. There's crafting in the game for sure, and you don't even need like a special crafting skill to do it. You just learn recipes as you go along. But those are two, so far as I can tell, create consumables that are going to be relevant to combat, not to persuasion, not to, yeah. So, but there's more to the combat and its systems than would be typical of other action RPGs. Of course, there are the very standard kind of elemental things and the fire damage, ice damage, and weaknesses and strengths that enemies are going to have against those different things. But you've also got the ability, similar to kind of Monster Hunter, to grab onto larger enemies that you might fight and kind of clamber around on them while you're stabbing and attacking them. And so there's just some more kind of mechanisms in combat that you can take advantage of. And that would be one of the major ones. But I mean, you can also throw things as a mechanic, throw barrels of oil or barrel bombs and stuff if you run into them. Encumbrance is very significant in this game. You do have a weight limit for your character, and as you approach the limits of your weight, your character slows down. More of your stamina, I believe, gets drained. Stamina is also a major component. You actually, even in the mage classes, don't have MP. It all comes from stamina, which is kind of, I think, an interesting and very reasonable approach. And so, but stamina is not as big of a factor as, say, a Souls-like game where, like, in 2 swings or something of a big weapon in a Souls game, you can deplete your stamina and then you're screwed, No, it's much more forgiving. It's just something you need to be mindful of. And I think in particular when you are running around in the open world. And the open world is also... it's very dense. It's like going from A to B, from one town to another, is a long journey because fast travel is very limited. which I have been very hesitant about the more I've heard about that. And as I experienced it in the first game, I'm like, I don't think I want this. Please tell me that they're going to make fast travel a thing. Well, they doubled down on the idea of no fast travel. But what they did in Dragon's Dogma 2 that I think they were going for in the first one but didn't really achieve was, at least in the early game, again, just 5 hours in, making the journey interesting. Even just following a well-worn dirt road from one town to another, that can be like at least a 30-minute journey in some cases. And you're running into stuff along the way that's either directly on the road or just off of the road that you can see. Some things that you could pretty easily avoid if you just stick to the road. And you're like, okay, I see some wolves doing their thing over there. I'm just going to stick to the road and hopefully they won't attack, and either they will or they won't. But other times you got goblins that are like, they are hanging out in the middle of this road. You're going to have to deal with them or run past them. And that's totally an option. And one I'm grateful for, because now and then you'll run into some especially big enemies that are kind of like, not as we would think of bosses, I guess, but maybe like mini bosses. I don't think I've run into yet what this game would really consider a boss, like a boss fight. Well, or at least I haven't engaged in one. There is this giant griffin, and a number of YouTube reviewers have referenced this griffin that attacks them, and then they followed through and attacked it, and it ended up being this big drawn-out thing. And I've not messed with the griffin yet. I am playing this game much more cautiously, and so yes, you can run from those larger enemies or smaller enemies. So far, I've not had a situation where I could not escape an enemy by running from it. And I think the game expects, not necessarily expects all players, but expects a number of players to choose that. The difficulty of the game, there's no difficulty settings. It is what it is. It's like, Monster Hunter in that regard. And I think going in with my mind expecting that probably helped me a lot. I think accepting my experience with Monster Hunter, that okay, I just have to use the systems in the game to kind of make the game easier for myself. But there are systems in Monster Hunter to make the game easier on you. You can take your time and be more careful. You can spend more time doing those easier monster hunts to really get your gear where you want it before you take on the harder ones. And I see something similar going on in Dragon's Dogma 2. I think it was probably in play in the first one. I just didn't have the patience to really see it through on a single playthrough. Even though I spent maybe 10 hours on that first one, that's divided up into 3 complete fresh starts of that game. So I think I am a little bit deeper into a single game playthrough of Dragon's Dogma 2 than I ever got with the first one. But anyway, yeah, I am. Well, there's at least a couple of reviewers too that have said this on YouTube that it's not. Well, maybe just one that I heard say this. I can't remember who it was. It's not necessarily a skill-based game. By that they meant, and I would agree with this as well, it's not about quick reflexes and enemy pattern memorization and like dodging at just the right time. I mean, it's to your advantage to figure out, how to dodge when you can dodge. I think the only character that can dodge is the thief. And that's what I started out as. I played for about 3 hours as a thief, and then the last 2 hours I reluctantly switched to a mage because I was really getting into a groove and a comfort zone with a thief. But I did definitely want to try out a mage because I super want to play a full dedicated mage whenever I can in an RPG. But my experience with the mage class in Dragon's Dogma didn't feel good, and so I was hesitant to really try it this time, and I still don't have a sense of it. I'll need to report on that next time. I'm just too early into my experience with the mage to have much to say. So, and I do plan on talking about this game for as long as I stick with it, on the podcast. So you can stay tuned for updates in the Geek Week segment. That's where I'll put the remainder of my thoughts about Dragon's Dogma as they develop in the Geek Week segment of this podcast. So Sorry, rabbit trail. What was I gonna say? Oh, I think probably something along the lines of just preparing. And yeah, you can be very cautious. There's a day-night cycle, and it is freaking to your advantage to only travel during the day if you can get away with it. There is a dirt path that you can stay on, and it is to your advantage to stay on that dirt path. The more you go off the beaten path as you're going from A to B, which a number of quests at the beginning are just about, okay, here's this, out here, go to this place, do this thing, and come back. It's more interesting sounding than that, for sure. But if you stay on the dirt road on the way there, it's going to be, I think, a lot more manageable. You're going to be fighting lower level enemies. You'll have fewer surprises of, big nasty things. But at the same time, you are incentivized, I think, constantly as you're walking along this road to go off the road. I'm tempted so many times because just every 30 seconds or less on the road, I feel like I'm seeing something just off the way. Oh, an entrance to a cave, or oh, a little camp here, and I see some dead bodies. What happened there? There's just things all around you that really play to your curiosity. But I mean, you're also taking a risk. But you can manage that risk, is my experience so far. It's very manageable. You also are not alone on your journey. You have these things called pawns, which are AI-controlled NPCs, and you can have up to 3 of them in your party. One of them is going to be your main pawn, which you create pretty much at the beginning of the game, around the same time you create your main character. And they, like you, can change vocations, and they gain XP and levels and stuff. The other pawns that you can recruit along the way, they do not gain levels. You're kind of expected to very frequently, as you and your main pawn rise in levels, swap out the other pawns for new pawns. And it's an interesting system because although this is a single-player game, these pawns are found by going to these, special sigil stone locations. I can't remember what they're called, but these magic stones that you go to, and they transport you into an ethereal lobby, sort of. Not with furniture and stuff, but, and there are, a dozen or so pawns to choose from, many of which are the main pawns of other players playing on your platform or maybe even other platforms. I don't know how much crossover there is between platforms. And so you can recruit temporarily. They don't lose their pawn when you do this, but you can recruit temporarily of the pawn of another player or just one of the ones that Capcom has made, and it's hard to tell the difference sometimes. There's a lot of customization that you can give to your pawn in how it looks and in its name. And so by the names, you can sometimes tell. Like if someone made Kratos, you're like, okay, well, Capcom didn't make a Kratos pawn. But anyway, you take them along with you, and they will learn things from their time with you. If they go on a quest with you, they will retain the knowledge of where that quest is, where you go to resolve it, and then when they return to their player, they will be able to aid that player in finding the destination that they need to go to for that quest. And there's not there are some map markers for quests, definitely, but they're not as helpful, near as helpful as in many other open world RPGs. And so that is a very welcome trait of pawns who have gained knowledge of a quest or something. And they have basic personality types that you can, that will determine what they're likely to do when you are not giving them more direct commands, like whether they're more likely to be aggressive and look for fights to get into, or if they're going to be reserved and more tactical, or if they're going to be looking to gather ingredients nearby. That's definitely an element of the open world stuff, of course, tied to the crafting is gathering stuff. So pawns are really very helpful, and there's a currency that you gain as you play the game that is used specifically for sort of hiring or renting these pawns. And once you acquire a pawn, you you keep it until you trade it out or until it dies. But anyway, you can recruit, if you have enough points or currency or whatever for it, a pawn that is higher than your level. It's going to cost more, for sure, to do that. But there are ways that you can, get yourself some really strong pawns that are going to help you get through difficult fights. And you can choose what classes you want. So, for example, so that it fits your playstyle and your strategy. So, for example, I started out playing as a thief. Well, my main pawn, he'll be able to change vocations later, but I started him out as a mage because the base mage class, despite what mages typically are in other games, is much more suited to healing than offensive damage. There's an advanced version of the mage class that you can graduate to, which is what I'm hoping to do, that is more offensive oriented. I think it's called the sorcerer. I haven't gotten to that point yet, neither has my main pawn. But in fact, I'm not even sure the classes your main pawn can graduate to are more limited than yours. Anyway, crap, rabbit trail again. Oh yeah, so party composition. I was a thief. My main pawn is starting out as a healer, and then to go along with that, I got, let's see, like a melee fighter, like an in-your-face fighter. And I think for a little while I tried having two mages just to really double up on healing as much as possible. But then I swapped one of the mages out for a ranged and archer. So the four classes you have at the start are fighter, which is just in-your-face melee, tank, drawing attention kind of guy. Archer, which is a ranged attacker doing physical damage, which some enemies are more weak to than magical damage. Mage, which is going to be ranged damage but a lot of healing as well, and support, like you can give your party members melee weapons or arrows and stuff. You can give them an element like fire or electricity or whatever as you learn those spells. And then finally thief, which isn't really about disarming traps, picking pockets, or unlocking doors. So far, I don't think that's really a thing necessarily in the game. It's not something I've run into in the first 5 hours. So the thief is just more about I guess if you think of it more as like an assassin type rogue class, that's going to be, it's the only class that has a dodge button. And it's just about getting in there, doing damage, and getting out. And that's why I started with that, because I was like, I'm so used to, with action games, having a dodge button now, I think I need to start with that. And I tend to be a pretty cautious player, and so you might think, well, Pater, why are you... I mean, that sounds like you're going to be getting up into their business and really having to make yourself vulnerable. But you also have items that you can use for healing. You are not completely relying on your mages for healing, which is really good, because I don't trust the AI to necessarily heal when I most need it. So far, I don't know that I've really paid attention to... the combat can be pretty involved, and so I think there's probably been times where I've lost some health and then been healed and didn't even notice that happening. It just happened while I was focusing on other things. My survivability in general with the approach I've been taking has been good. The only time I really got into trouble was when I, just actually about an hour before recording this, I was like, I'm going to try making this trek from this city to this city without using an ox cart, which is a pseudo fast travel option that is imperfect because your fast travel can be interrupted by an attack mid-journey that snaps you out of that fast travel, and then you have to deal with that attack and possibly walk the rest of the way. But I was like, I'm just going to try walking the journey. I want to see what that's like, see if it's interesting, see how dangerous it is. And it went pretty well. But when it got dark, that's when things got nasty. Because not only did I have trouble seeing, but there are some enemies that only come out at night, like skeletons and skeleton sorcerers. And like when they are coming out of the darkness... the way that night works in this game, they legitimately make it so you can't see. I mean, like, there are other games like Skyrim or whatever that when it's dark, it basically just adds a blue filter to everything. You know what I mean? Like when movies are shooting day for night and add a blue filter afterward. Or you can adjust your contrast and your brightness on your screen and basically just eliminate any problems of visibility. Not so in Dragon's Dogma. There is nothing you can do to your brightness that's going to make you able to see. It is just hard-coded into the design of the visuals. And you do have these lanterns that you absolutely need because like the problems I'm talking about with visibility, that's with the lanterns. You still can only see, a little ways in front of you. If you don't have lanterns, you are really hosed. So you got to make sure you have oil for your lantern. That's not been a thing I've had to micromanage up to this point. But again, I've barely been messing around with nighttime anyway. So back to my nighttime experience. I was kind of pressing my luck a little bit. Excuse me, because I haven't found a clock that'll tell me what time it is and when does the sun go down. I'm just kind of looking at the sky as I go. And I thought I'd been running into campsites enough that are the places you can use out in the open world to camp. You can't just camp anywhere, and you need to have like a camping set, a camping kit or whatever. And those are consumables, and they're also heavy. So you're only going to want to have maybe a couple with you while you're out in the open world. So it's quite a thing to think about making a long trek from A to B. And it plays into that, if you're the type of person that likes to really think and prepare, then I think, you might enjoy that. And as I'm finding that I do. So anyway, that nighttime experience, I pushed my luck and I almost lost because I didn't reach a campsite. A new one didn't show up quite as soon as I thought it would. I actually saw the embers of a campfire in the distance. I was like, okay, there, I just gotta get there. And then it suddenly, went the full way from getting dark to dark. And the skeletons came out, and the skeleton mage came out. I didn't even know there were skeleton mages. I mean, I didn't know what to expect when things got dark. I had very little experience with that in the original game either. But when some big spell lit up the space around my party, I was like, I don't think my mage knows that spell. What the crap is going on? And so, I might have expected to see a skeleton at night, but right away, like some kind of a lich or like a skeleton mage or whatever the crap it was, I was not ready for that. And one or two of my pawns got knocked out, and once your pawns get knocked out, there's kind of like a timer that's ticking down, and you have that amount of time to revive them before they die permanently. You get your main pawn back, at like a town or something like that if they die permanently. Or maybe you can just always revive them on the spot. I don't know exactly how that works. Hasn't happened yet, but temporary pawns, you just lose those. But it's fairly generous. I mean, unless you get like two of your pawns knocked out at once and you're still in the thick of a bad fight, then probably you'll be able to get a little bit of breathing room, get enough attention off of you using your remaining pawn to go over there and revive them. Although it does, you have to go over there and basically hold down circle and not be interrupted by an attack or something. So it's probably about 1 1000, 2 1000, 3 1000, 4 1000, 5 1000, 6 1000. It's somewhere between 6 and 10 seconds that you have to be able to hold that down for without taking a hit. And so it was hit or miss, no pun intended, trying to revive one of my pawns at one point. But I found it doable. I came back from the brink of defeat in that moment. And that would have been frustrating because let me tell you about the save system. And IGN, I don't go to IGN for much because I certainly don't really care about their opinions in reviews. Unless they're reviewing a Zack Snyder movie, in which case I think as long as they hate it, there's a good chance I'm going to like it. But they did have this video that basically just unpacked the save system. That's been getting a lot of attention with this game. And it turned me off at first. I had to wrap my head around it and kind of accept it and consider what the benefits would be of it. Because if you're new to my content and you don't know this about me already, I'll just tell you, I don't like being challenged in games. I don't play games for challenge. I play them for immersion, to be in a different world and to have a power fantasy and all those kinds of things, not for challenge. So I'm usually playing on the easiest difficulty. So the fact that I discovered this deep, deep love for Monster Hunter World and playing it almost exclusively solo, which is the most difficult way to play it, is a bit unusual. But it comes back to this thing I'm talking about with Dragon's Dogma, where it's like, if the game's mechanics allow you to plan your way out of trouble, and not force you to be good and reflexible and all that kind of stuff that cool gamers can do that I can't, then I can really discover an enjoyment of it. And that's the case with this game. So anyway, Rabbit Trail again, dang it. Save system, that's right. Okay. I'm trying here, guys. I'm really trying. Okay, so you have basically one save slot that, well, two potentially that you kind of have access to. The main save is going to be an autosave. That every few minutes or after certain things, that autosave gets triggered. You can manually save over that autosave at any time. But that basically is just another autosave, and so it's the same save slot that's getting saved over and over and over again, whether it's by automatically saving wherever and whenever, or because of an autosave. And that is super scary to me, because I'm like, well, what if your save gets corrupted? Or what? And now maybe behind the scenes, I don't know, maybe behind the scenes, they actually keep, like a run of 6 of these, so that if one of them gets corrupted, the game will know, okay, we're going to go back to the most recent save that's not corrupted out of 6 or whatever. I have no idea. But from the player's perspective, what you have access to, it's just that autosave, except kind of, as IGN explained it, you have kind of a hard save at an inn. And this is something that you can go back to if you... You know what? Let me just pause for a second, load up my game, and see if I can see this for myself. Okay, yes, I just confirmed this. From the title screen, not from just anywhere while you're playing the game, from like the menus while you're playing the game. You have to be at the title screen. You can either load your last save or load your last in-rest save. When you rest at an inn, this kind of harder save is made, and that's very significant, because that means that if you are out in the wild somewhere and you get into a bad situation, like the IGN reviewer described a state where they climbed up on this mountain that they weren't really supposed to be able to get to quite, and they just, in a tricky way, got themselves up there, but then they got into a bugged out state where they couldn't leave the mountain, but they had an autosave made while they were up there. And so reloading their game it would totally destroy their entire playthrough of the game, because that would be their only save. But thankfully, Capcom said, let's treat the inn saves as a separate thing that you can access. And so whenever you rest at an inn, that is your last, unless some weird off the wall corruption were to happen that we have no reason to think would. That is your truly safe save. Other autosaves, they might happen right before, or for all I know, I don't know this yet, I don't think in the middle of combat, but you might just be out in the wilderness and your fatigue, your stamina so low that you just can't get back to a safe place. You just dug yourself into a hole you can't get yourself out of systemically. And so that's why that in-save function is there. And so the way my mentality has been, when I reach a town, like the last thing I want to do before I leave town is rest at an inn. The reason I want that to be the last thing is so I rest until morning, so that I go out and my journey starts at the butt crack of dawn, so that I am least likely to run into night while I'm out and about. And I take, of course, camping supplies with me, and I'm going to be, I think, much more cautious going forward, erring on the side of caution and camping before it gets dark. But anyway, so so if you plan, it's just about planning. And that's where it reminds me of Monster Hunter, because in the over 1,000 hours that I put into Monster Hunter World, and the now hundreds of hours that I put into Monster Hunter Rise, I still don't do that much more than mashing buttons when I'm fighting monsters. I mean, I try to mash buttons while pointing my character at what I think is the weak spot of the monster, you know, but I mean, I know I'm not near as skilled. I get too panicky. Other people are good at, like, you know, okay, well, you do 2 of these in a row, 2 triangle twice, and then circle or whatever without canceling out into a dodge roll, and you'll do this maneuver. I can't do that. I get up close to monsters, I'm stressed out, I'm freaked out, and before I know it, I'm just hammering triangle. So, and that was pretty much, with a few exceptions now and then, as good as I got with with fighting and the action combat in Monster Hunter World and Rise. And the way I made it through those games was by preparing, by making sure I had the types of consumables I would want to get me out of bad situations, making sure that well, now talking about Dragon's Dogma 2, making sure, yes, I have those consumables, but also that I have the spells slotted to my quick slots. And you don't have a lot of them, so you have to be choosy if you're playing as a mage, which I was the last 2 hours. But making sure that, okay, my pawn, he has these spells at the ready, I have these spells at the ready, we complement each other, we're ready for these situations. Now we're going to head out into the world. And then likewise, when you're out in the world, there's still some preparation you can do. With goblin camps or groups, for example, I usually can see them. If you're watching, you can usually see, oh, there's some movement off to the right in the forest. I think that's a harpy. No, that's a wolf. That's a pack of wolves. Okay. And so you can identify what it is you're coming up on many times. Most of the time has been my experience. And because of that, I'm like, okay, let's fire up my mage shield that will basically cancel the first 3 hits that my mage takes for the next 2 minutes or whatever. Let's get that fired up, and then let's put fire damage on my main fighter's weapons, and now let's walk into it. So there's things that you can do to prepare. And even if you're not playing as a mage, so you don't actually have as much personally to do to prepare, you do have commands that you can give your pawns, which I didn't talk about earlier. But the main commands are, let's see here, go, which tells them to either just move forward and engage with enemies that are in range, or sometimes if one of your pawns suggests something, then you can hit go to basically say, yeah, do that. Wait makes them to just wait where they're at. I haven't used that yet. To me makes them regroup with you, which I use when I'm running. I'm like, to me, come on. We're getting out of here. And then help focuses on healing you, healing party members, giving you defensive, offensive buffs, stuff like that. And so even when I'm playing as a thief, as I'm approaching a bunch of bandits or whatever, I can hit help, and I'll at least make sure my health is topped off, and my mage, usually if they have like a certain disposition, like mine is kind-hearted I chose for my main pawn, that means that he's going to tend to be more focused on helping you out, giving you buffs, healing you, stuff like that. And if you play this game and you run into a pawn named Merrick, spelled with 2 Ks, that is almost certainly mine. I don't know who else would choose to spell their guy that way. He also has light brown hair that's kind of like mine, and currently he is a mage, and kind-hearted and focused on healing and stuff. So anyway, yeah, let me know if you happen to randomly run into him. There's so many people playing this game, I think it's highly unlikely that anybody would, and I don't think there's a way you can search for pawns by name. That would be cool if they could. They do tell you, or they give you some kind of a username for the other player that it came from, although it's a Capcom-generated user ID tag. It's not like their gamer tag. But I'm wondering what that's about. I haven't really looked into that. But you can like favorite certain pawns, so once you've had them, you can favorite them, so I think you can find them again, maybe. And maybe since they're giving you like ID tags made by Capcom for other players, maybe there is some kind of a system I haven't found yet to do that. Anyway, if anybody playing this wants to email me and let me know kind of like what your Capcom-generated ID tag is for you as a player, or what your pawn's name is, or both, I'll see if I can find your pawn, so feel free to reach out if you want. Okay, so that's the save system. That's I guess the main word is preparation. That's what is making this game work for me so far. And I haven't really mentioned up to this point how I'm feeling about it. And how I'm feeling about it is good. I'm enjoying this game. And I think it's because I started to see pretty early on that I could prepare my way, I could think my way in advance out of problems. Or I could avoid the worst kinds of problems by just thinking in advance. And I'm having deja vu. I feel like I might have said this at some point about Monster Hunter Rise or something, but I think that my personality type, my quirks as specifically a worrier and someone who's prone to worrying about things and overthinking things, sometimes in an effort to avoid problems in my life, I'll imagine worst case scenarios. My wife calls me paranoid boy because of that. But it does help me and our family avoid some real troubles in life to have a paranoid boy helping to lead things. And so I think if you have that kind of wiring, that games like this, like Monster Hunter, you'll find that even if you're not good at action games generally, you can, in a very satisfying way, feel prepared. And yes, combat is still intense, and yes, there's still some, I've not hit a fail state yet. In fact, the closest I thought I was coming to a fail state was in the first 30 minutes. There was a fight with a goblin, and when he hit me, I was like, oh, dang, he's really doing damage. I need to back off and let the NPCs that are guiding me around here, do the bulk of the work here. But it does seem to be that enemies, at least low-level enemies, like the grunt type, the smaller humanoid-size enemies that you run into, do not scale. They do not become stronger as you become stronger, and so you can grind for XP, become more powerful, and then really make short work of the smaller enemies. That's what I'm feeling so far in the first 5 hours, is that some enemies of the more humanoid size, like goblins and harpies, they took a while for me to take out the first few times I encountered them. But then as I gained levels, as I upgraded my weapons, I was, especially the goblins, getting through them individually much faster than I was before. So I haven't fully investigated the nature of enemy scaling, if there is any. I think I read somewhere that maybe the big boss monsters don't scale, but I'm not sure if that includes what I was kind of categorizing as mini bosses. So I don't know. There's still a lot to investigate. I think that also for someone like me, it might be worth waiting maybe a month or two, even if you are interested in this game, to really start playing it in earnest, because that'll give time for the really hardcore content creators that are focused on this game to get the wikis built out, to get the videos made, so that you can kind of watch a tips video and say, okay, so these are the things I really need to think about, or, and that becomes part of the preparation process. And I'm already experiencing some of that with this game that I discovered I enjoyed in Monster Hunter World and Rise. That like watching some videos, looking up wikis, for me, sometimes I would leave my game on, or just in the middle of playing the game, I would just leave it on while I'm in a base, and I would just spend 30 minutes or more looking up stuff on wikis and just letting the console count that as playtime, so that when I go back and look at how long I've spent with Monster Hunter World, it's been over 1,000 hours, but that's not 1,000 hours of me constantly using the controller. I really do consider the research part of it part of playing it. And so that's so far what I'm experiencing with Dragon's Dogma 2, and not near as much. I mean, so if that's a turnoff to you, don't worry about that. I'm in the game, I'm just thinking about the systems, the mechanics available to me, and leveraging them to make things easier for myself. And yeah, I'm having a good time. I haven't talked about really the presentation of the game. It is a pretty classic medieval fantasy world with, thankfully, a very serious looking vibe to it. So it's not super colorful and cartoony. I mean, like I was just playing Assassin's Creed Valhalla a lot this week leading up to playing Dragon's Dogma 2. And I would say that it has a similar kind of vibe to its visual aesthetics to Valhalla, which is going for a historical, grounded look to it. But the difference is you've got griffins and goblins and harpies and dragons. And so, in other words, it is very much what I have in mind when I think of a classic D&D aesthetic. Less colorful than the D&D movie. That was just had more color in the costumes and designs and stuff like that. It's definitely more muted and slightly in the monochrome direction by comparison, anyway. But it's full on fantasy, baby, and the spell effects look great. Even the really low level ones that I'm seeing so far. Yeah, so I'm really enjoying the visual presentation. It is not the most polished game in its visuals, for sure. What you're going to hear online, but not really from me, because it's not really a focus for me, a lot of to-do is being made out of the 30 frames per second average that it's getting on consoles instead of 60, and the very wide range of frames per second on PC that it's getting. So there's kind of like some stink about that. And Capcom has said they're going to be looking for ways to improve that. So, and I think they will. But even if they don't, I'm finding it to be a pretty consistent 30 frames per second experience, although I haven't been to the big city yet that people are saying it starts to get more choppy at. I've just been in the smaller settlements, the smaller towns. But anyway, yeah, I mean, the textures aren't always like really up close, great looking. And so it's not a game like a first-party Sony game or like a Ubisoft game that's going to tend to be more polished in that department. I already mentioned the frame rate stuff. What else? Oh, there's some weird pop-in that I've experienced, like really close-up pop-in, like in an inn. I don't know if it's because time passed and like this character it shows up at night, but he didn't just walk in the door. Like he like teleported in. I had an entire ox cart with security detail materialize on the road in front of me. I haven't seen that happen with monsters. So that is a big deal. Because if monsters were like teleporting in like that, I would say screw that. That is not fair. It's just been harmless things in towns or out in the wild that kind of teleport in. So that's very good. But I mean, also like when you're talking to people, their facial mouth animations, I mean, they're very wooden and they are just watermelon. I mean, so in terms of that, it's really falling short. It's falling short of the detail in the facial animations is falling short of some Xbox 360 games. It's not good. But that's not what this game is prioritizing. And I'm fine with that. I don't go to games for a story either. But even if I did for this one, I do have to say the voice acting I have not turned off yet, which is a little unusual. In part probably because I'm not asked to sit through a bunch of listening at a time to anybody. But even so, I've not turned the voice acting off. It's really solid voice acting. So I feel like it kind of makes up for the bad facial animations. What else? Oh, the story itself, pretty basic. You are the Arisen, which means you're supposed to be the sovereign ruler of this land, but there's a pretender to the throne that's currently on the throne. And so you're overarching long-term story arc is to show that they're a pretender and that you're the one that should be on the throne. And so, but I mean, I'm not playing the game for that. I don't find the story, the hook, really compelling. I'm just in it for the gameplay, like you would be for Monster Hunter. But the fact that they've given more attention, certainly, to story than Monster Hunter, even the recent Monster Hunter games, is welcome. So let's see, what else? Anything else I want to touch on? I think if I were to try and enunciate what it is that currently is making me want to get back in this game and get lost in this game, which is what I want. I am definitely feeling that pull in this game right now. It has to do with some of the things about its design mechanics that in other games would really bother me. The downside, the downsides of the save system go without saying. But the upside is, as you might suspect, that you really have to think and plan more carefully because you can't just fall back on some save really easily. You've got to think about, do I have the supplies that I need before I head out on this journey? Should I craft such and such first? Do I want to run from this encounter, or do I want to try and, take a crack at it? All of the choices that you're making that have to do with moving around, surviving, and succeeding in the open world, they require more thought. And I think that what's driving me to really think carefully is not a realistic belief that I'm likely to die. Because like I said, I have not hit a fail screen yet. Even when I got myself into trouble, I was able to get myself out of it. But I mean, I got myself out of it by running. And I just don't even like being in those kind of intense situations if I can be cautious and avoid them until I'm really, really prepared. So, I think overall it's not that the quote unquote difficulty is punishing. I don't feel punished by this game. I feel like even when I've been in over my head, they've given me the means to get out of it. But just being in that really hairy situation, which can really happen from time to time, depending on the choices you make, incentivizes me all the more to really think. And then I feel rewarded for my worrying and planning and thinking and prepping. And on top of that, when I'm out in the world, I talked about this a little bit with Elix, that, man, Elix pushes back in its difficulty enough that you are incentivized to scrounge and pick up everything you can in the open world because it is all in some way going to help you survive, so you better pick it up. And I feel something similar with this game, although this game doesn't push back as much as the first Elix game did. But it pushes back enough that when I see opportunities to gather something, to open a chest, I'm like, yes, get it, open it. But then there's still choices to be made, because unlike Elix that has no encumbrance, I definitely have encumbrance that I have to deal with. And encumbrance also, in some games it can at some point feel irritating, and in other games it's part of the planning. For many hours playing Skyrim, I was totally content to have encumbrance. Only in recent years did I apply a mod that was like, not giving me infinite encumbrance capacity, but much, much more than I would normally have. But I like having some level of encumbrance because it gives me interesting choices to make when I'm picking stuff up. Is this worth picking up or not? Like there's the classic for me 10-to-1 ratio for, pounds or weight units or whatever. It's one weight unit. It better be worth at least 10 coins. That's my default, what I go off of when I have encumbered systems. And so, so the encumbrance, even though I feel the need to grab everything I can, I also appreciate even the encumbrance, because it gives me interesting decisions to make even when I'm just walking out on the road and currently not fighting anybody. So, I just appreciate the thoughtfulness, not in a brain-burny way. I mean, there's lots of thinking involved, but it's different from like a tactical RPG, where I can just end up sitting and staring at the screen while nothing is happening. This is different. There's stuff's always happening, but you're thinking while it's happening. You're prepping, trying to anticipate, but given time to think, without it ever getting too boring, and given ways to get out of bad situations that you didn't think about enough. So, I love the feeling of being going out into this world and feeling like, okay, here we go. I got to get from A to B. This journey, I know it's going to be eventful. I know it's going to be interesting. And it has been. Every time I've gone out, I've run into stuff along the way that makes it interesting. That has nothing to do with the thing I'm trying to get to. It's just these randomly generated encounters and stuff that happen. Combat encounters almost exclusively, but still, interesting stuff. And unlike that feeling of prepping and going out on a journey that like, okay, I am in this, here we go, in Monster Hunter World, well, like Monster Hunter Rise, you can pause. You can pause. It's beautiful. In fact, in the middle of combat, you can pause and open up your menu and drink your potions and instantly get HP back. So it's not like HP that you're gaining in real time, through real quick generation like some action RPGs will handle it. No, despite the very action RPG nature of this game, consumables take effect instantly while you're paused and in your menus. And that's a big deal for me, because I can suddenly be like, oh my gosh, I am at the brink of death. And then I can next second be at 100%, Well, not necessarily 100%, because as you're out in the open world, your max HP just from fatigue and stuff drops, and you gain back your max HP from resting at camp or resting in an inn. Anyway, that's one more of a number of little details about this game that are just different. They just have some layers and stuff that you have to think about. So, I guess I don't have anything more that I would really add. If you have any particular questions, let me know. Paeter at spiritblade.com. I will, I think, continue to be playing this game. Unless it surprises me, I think I'll be playing it for a long time. But that is a possibility of being surprised. And I think that's probably an important note to end on. Again, I've only played 5 hours, and there is a question remaining in my mind about whether or not I'm going to feel the same way about this game 30 hours in. I think I've heard that if you beeline the main story, you can do it in 20, which for me, I usually have to add on half again as many hours as other people's estimates. But I'm just wondering, and that's if you really beeline the main story, which I do not plan on doing by any means. So am I going to feel the same way? Is the journey going to still be interesting from A to B, 10 hours deeper in? And if not, is there going to be enough fast travel options given to me to compensate for that? Are there going to be other changes made to the game to compensate for the fact that, I guess now I'm kind of tired of the encumbrance thing. I don't know what I'm going to get tired of yet. And so that's going to be what's really interesting to me, is what does the game do, if anything, to anticipate players getting tired of some of these limiting factors that at the beginning maybe make it interesting and engaging and immersive, quote unquote, but later on just become an annoyance, an inconvenience. I don't know. So you can stamp a big "we'll see" on my thoughts, but as far as like how I felt about the first 5 hours, I'm really in this game, and I think it's going to be the main game that I'm playing. I do want to mention, because it's kind of my custom to do so, any themes I'm noticing so far, philosophical, moral themes. There's some stuff at the beginning that uses a bit of follow your heart language. I can't remember exactly how they phrase it. It sounds more Elizabethan Englishy. Follow thine heart, follow thine ambition, or whatever. But it doesn't. It's more like like a voiceover and kind of like an opening cinematic type thing. I'm not sure exactly how that's going to play out. So, and maybe it has a double meaning because your heart gets ripped out by this dragon and you're given powers by the dragon. Maybe, I don't know. So I don't know that there's really going to be anything philosophically that's going to come of that. But it was noteworthy to me, since I hadn't heard something that close to the follow your heart language in a little while, in games at least. There's also, I suppose, the element of the multiverse, which I think can sometimes be leveraged philosophically. It was in three-body problem, as I mentioned in my review of Season 1. But I think the multiverse here is just being played with as a device for, just like time travel is usually in fiction a device for exploring, well, what if you had made a different choice in your life? What if you had the chance to do it again? Multiverse is often used the same way. A different version of you made a different choice. This other world, these other people made different choices. What if? That's what it's all about. It's like the what if type of thing. And in this case, I don't even think it's necessarily being played for any of that stuff. It really just seems to be a very subtle background element that provides a basis for the pawn system, because the pawns that are your NPCs in your party come from parallel realities. Where another player is the arisen in that world. And that's basically it. It's just for that conceit, as far as I can tell so far. It doesn't seem. It's interesting that they do bother to kind of make that part of the lore. These pawns, everyone in the game world knows what these pawns are, and they treat them a certain way because of what they are. So it's very much a present part of the lore. But the multiverse aspect isn't really something that seems to be a significant part of the lore yet. So I'll certainly report on any kind of thematic stuff that comes up in future Geek Week segments of the Christian Geek Central podcast as I continue playing this game, as I imagine that I probably will for a while. So I will plan to report more next week, but those are my thoughts for now about Dragon's Dogma 2. On the PS5, by the way. That's the console I'm playing on. Okay, that's all. For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services.